So what does the designation of the resistance front as a foreign terrorist organization actually mean? What does it entail? What if the TRF calls itself, let's say from tomorrow, Pakistan Peace Foundation, and then continues to spread terror? Because terrorist organizations have repeatedly changed their name in Pakistan, they continue to spread terror. And does this smack of US double standards? Ban the TRF and yet sup with the devil, failed Marshal Asim Munir? Let's try and make sense of these developments and, of course, discuss the road ahead for India in our war on Pakistan's state-sponsored radical Islamist terror. Joining me on this India First special broadcast is General Atta Hasnain, former General Officer Commanding of the Kashmir Corps. He's someone who's dealt with Pakistan terror firsthand. Ambassador Kamal Sibal, former Foreign Secretary of India. He's also been India's ambassador to Russia, Turkey, Egypt and France. Sir, welcome. Also with us from the United States is Professor Andrew Latham, Professor of International Relations at the Macalester University. He's an expert analyst on international relations, regional conflict and security. Ambassador Sibal, how should India view this designation of the Resistance Front as a foreign terrorist organization and the timing of this designation?
Well, it's a bit surprising because while the United States and others, including China, condemned the attack in Pahalgam, but they did not name the Resistance Front as responsible for this, much less acknowledging that the Resistance Front actually was Pakistan-based. In the UN Security Council, the Pakistanis claim, perhaps not wrongly, that there was an initiative to name the Resistance Front, but they got the name eliminated because of its linkage with Pakistan. At the same time, as you have rightly pointed out, notwithstanding what happened in Pahalgam, and the fact that we have a mullah, a rabid Islamist, as now the Field Marshal of Pakistan, he was invited to a special lunch by President Trump, who praised the leadership of Pakistan, knowing and in fact acknowledging that the real leadership was the military leadership. So in that sense, he was absolving Field Marshal Munir and the Pakistan Army and Pakistan itself in general from any responsibility for what happened at Pahalgam. Now you have the Resistance Front being designated as a terrorist organization and a internationally designated group, which is good, which puts pressure on Pakistan because the subtext is known to all that this organization is based in Pakistan. So without naming Pakistan, the message is clear, which is why the Pakistani Foreign Ministry has reacted extremely sharply. In fact, the tone is despicable. I mean, calling India a rogue nation and saying that we are going to exploit this designation to our ends, and saying that Pakistan has zero tolerance of terrorism and complete nonsense like that.
No, that's a
because
farce.
lying is their second nature. Now,
absolutely.
The other point which we must note is, without getting too enthusiastic about this, though we must welcome this, is that it's not as if this is the first time terrorist organizations in Pakistan have been designated as international terrorist organizations and individuals too by the relevant UN committee. This has been going on for years. But has that ended terrorism in Pakistan, or has that led to Pakistan being declared some sort of a terrorist state or sanctions on Pakistan? Yes, they were put on the FTF, but they were removed from the FTF. Now, this will give us a handle, actually, what has happened, is to again demand that we put back on the FTF and therefore exploit it as much as we can. But we should not get enthusiastic as if naming this organization solves a terrorist problem, because Pakistan, as from the statement you can see, is totally in denial. Totally in denial.
It
and
indeed
unless
is,
there
Professor
real
Latham.
pressure put on them, they're not going to back off.
Professor Latham, there are commentators in India who say that US action actually smacks of double standards and blatant double standards. They designate TRF a terrorist organization, and yet they sup with Pakistan's terrorist-in-chief Asim Munir. Pakistan Army, as you well know, is the fountainhead of terror and has been involved in the killing of American troops in Afghanistan.
Yes, and I think we need to bear in mind that there are multiple and cross-cutting and sometimes incompatible interests that the Trump administration is pursuing. On the one hand, there's a residual counterterrorism, 9/11 thing. That's dropped way down in terms of American foreign policy priorities in recent years, but it's still there. And so what's one motivator. Another motivator is to avoid a nuclear war on the subcontinent. And you know how President Trump thinks, the art of the deal. He wrote a book, or it was ghostwritten for him, I suppose. And the logic, you think he would have been disabused of this logic given his interactions with Vladimir Putin. But his approach seems to be, let's be friends, let me be buddies with everybody around the table, even if they've committed crimes and they're on the wrong side. I can do a deal with them. So there's a little bit of that going on. Thirdly, I think there's a third or fourth. The United States really, really wants Pakistan to be on Team USA. But more than that, it wants India to be on Team USA in the global struggle, great power competition with China. And so you can see how these are cross-cutting imperatives, and they're not easily reconciled, and it looks like hypocrisy. And in fact, it's caused the wheels of government to grind even more exceedingly slowly than they usually do. This government has taken, 3 weeks, a month to issue this statement. But it's not at all surprising to me. Maybe it's because I'm an immigrant to this country and I see it through the same eyes as you guys do from the outside, even though I'm on the inside. It's very hard to reconcile all of these. The scary piece in all of this is we learned some lessons during the Cold War. The US and the Soviet Union fought proxy wars, but they never, ever, ever attacked each other. They never did that. No US soldier, there were movies about this, Hunt for Red October and things like that, but they
Yes.
never did it because it could easily spiral out of control. And that's what two countries that are a world apart, the Soviet Union and the United States, are not neighbors. They're not neck and neck the way India and Pakistan are. And so Pakistan's, with government support, the LET and then TRF, its proxy, perpetrating these attacks in a very sensitive part of the subcontinent, as you and your viewers know, is begging for escalation that could
And yet
easily
India
end.
was able to control it, because I
Yes.
don't want the world to continue falling for this nuclear escalation bogey. That's a Pakistan trap. And under which Pakistan continues to spread terror, and Operation Sindoor would have disabused the world, one would have thought. But General Hasnain, will the designation of TRF as a terrorist organization have any impact on the situation? Now, inside Jammu and Kashmir, they may try, but overall, what's your assessment of the designation and the US actions?
Gaurav, a very fine question, no doubt, and I'll take off from where Ambassador Kamal Sibal spoke. I am enthused, like everyone else, very happy. Taken 3 months, but at least it's happened. But I'm a realist, and I do want to tell our viewers, 2008 or maybe around that time, Hafiz Saeed was also designated an international terrorist. $10 million was put on his head. 2014, the Jamaat Dawa, which was the morphed element of the Lashkar-e-Taiba, was also banned. 2019, finally, the TRF came up as a proxy entity of the Lashkar-e-Taiba. So it's got a long history behind it, and the US has been taking action from time to time, but all this at the strategic level maybe helps in diplomacy. It helps in speaking about this at forums such as G20. It also helps a lot in the efforts in the FATF. But when it comes down to brass tacks on the ground, I have seen no difference. I have seen no difference on the ground. The TRF has been there throughout the earlier years, the Lashkar-e-Taiba through the 90s, the Jaish-e-Mohammed through the early part of the millennium.
2000, yeah.
These organizations have all been there, and they've all had their proxies, they've had their financial networks. No doubt they have been dented hugely. Their capability has been compromised to a great extent. But a major decision in the United States for it to travel down and have a sub-tactical effect in the Kashmir Valley may take a very, very long time.
Okay, because on staying on the aspect of US double standards, and I completely agree with you, General Hasnain, that on ground, terrorist organizations like Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, Jamaat-ud-Dawa, Falah Insaniyat Foundation, they may have either had a US designation or a UN designation. Terror continued on ground and continued to bleed India and Indians. Ambassador Sybil, it's not just India and Indians. You remember Admiral Mike Mullen, Chairman US Joint Chiefs of Staff? Way back in 2011, he said he exposed Pakistan's duplicity. And he said it had put in jeopardy a US-Pakistan partnership against terrorism. He also said Haqqani network was a veritable arm of Pakistan's ISI. Donald Trump himself had criticized Pakistan in his first term. What's changed in his second term in your appreciation, sir?
I don't think anything has changed. In fact, in some ways, it's become even more difficult for us because this whole business about mediation by United States on the issue of Jammu and Kashmir was buried. Nobody was talking about it. But Trump has raised this issue not once, but even earlier. Not this time, but even earlier when he met Imran Khan. He said he would love to mediate the Jammu and Kashmir issue. And the fact that he's been, as I mentioned earlier, praising the leadership of Pakistan and knowing fully well the background of Field
No, but
Marshal
why is he doing this in your appreciation?
Well, this is a very difficult question to answer for the simple reason that he is, in a sense, hitting at and alienating his allies too. Look at the manner in which he's targeted Japan. Although Japan is the linchpin of any confrontation with China in the Western Pacific. It has military bases, it has military personnel, US military personnel deployed. So it's critical, but nevertheless, he has slapped Japan to the extent that Japan is now saying that they'll have to charter a more independent course in foreign policy, the manner in which he's alienated Europe. So I think this is part of his personality, and you have to deal with it. Very erratic, very impulsive, and he substitutes tariffs for geopolitics. He's not thinking about policy; he's thinking about deals, and that's very short-sighted for a country which is the most powerful in the world and the leader of the most powerful country in the world. He has no vision except tariffs and trade deals. The world cannot be run on that basis. But a little bit on this business of US designating this. The point is now, if the UN were to go and designate the Resistance Front as an international terrorist organization under their charter, under the relevant committee, that would be a step forward. But then we will see if China blocks this, as they have been blocking the designation of the head of
Masood Azhar.
Masood Azhar for about 8-10 years. Of course, that would be a sort of a diplomatic victory if we were able to achieve that, and we'll be able to then see if China, which is talking about reviving the RIC dialogue and all that, whether they are willing to actually go forward and send some positive diplomatic signals to India. But leave that aside. All that you
but that's a very interesting point you've raised.
Let me just complete this. All that you mentioned about Mike Mullen and all that in 2011. After that, what has happened? Nothing has happened, despite such overt statements being made by the military chief of the United States. What has happened? Nothing. They continue to support Pakistan. They continue to seek support for Pakistan against the Taliban, and knowing that Pakistan has stabbed them in the back and then handed over Afghanistan to Taliban itself. So I think it's very difficult to actually, in a very understand what is driving American foreign policy. And I think what was said earlier by the gentleman, one of the panelists, about the United States trying to have its cake and eat it too, having stronger relations with India but not abandoning Pakistan. This has been their policy right from the start, and we have to cope with it as best we can.
Okay. Professor Latham, because US lives have been lost, not just in Afghanistan, and I believe close to 3,000 US lives were lost in Afghanistan, more than 20,000 injured, many blamed on direct intelligence leaks by Pakistan to the Taliban and other organizations in Afghanistan, but also during 26/11, for example. Pakistan has bled the United States on US soil and elsewhere. Daniel Pearl killed in Pakistan, that Pakistani Air Vice Marshal's son involved in terror attack in New York. And yet, instead of holding Pakistan's feet to fire, US was arming Pakistan, modernizing their F-16s. Recently, Pakistan's Air Force chief was in the United States seeking more modern aircraft, weapon systems, and air defense systems. Why would US entertain Pakistan?
Well, for reasons that I alluded to earlier, I think there's part of the blob, the deep state, the foreign policy establishment, whatever you want to call it, that believes it can seduce Pakistan back into the American fold. And it won't happen right away, and there's a price to be paid, having your cake and eating it too, as my colleague said. But in the medium to long run, the hope is that if relations continue to improve, that the violence perpetrated by Pakistan-backed terrorists will subside, and Pakistan will go out once again, not once again, but maybe for the first time, brought squarely onto Team USA. And think about that from an American perspective. If you can manage the India-Pakistan conflict, you can dial it down a little bit. You can dial down the India-US, Pakistan-US tensions. You've got a pretty formidable pole in so far a Cold War, as it were, with China in the Indo-Pacific. And I think that Trump has bought into that. I don't think he's smart enough to have that idea himself. His idea is, let's sit down at the table with everybody, wine and dine everybody, and let's do a deal. And the tariffs, by the way, I have to disagree with one of my colleagues here, are not a replacement for geopolitics or grand strategy. They're a key element of it. Trump thinks he can use tariffs to beat other countries into some kind of submission, both over trade policy, but also over broader geopolitical postures. He may be wrong, but I firmly believe that's part of his motivation. He really thinks that tariffs are, what did he call them? A beautiful word, but that's a symbolic way of saying that he thinks they're an effective tool on the global geopolitical stage.
Okay, remains to be seen what kind of a pushback is there from different parts of the world. Still early days, but General Hasnain, when you look at China, you look at Pakistan, you look at the situation here in India, Ambassador Sybil spoke of China wanting to move forward on Russia's idea of reviving Russia, India, China trilateral. We had a statement from the Chinese Foreign Office saying they're willing to move forward on it. You think America will succeed in weaning away Pakistan from the dragon's stranglehold? Will the dragon be okay with it? Pakistan trying to, to sail in two boats. Can it actually succeed in doing that? So far, it has to an extent.
Gaurav, this is a very interesting question, and this is a debate which has always gone on. But may I offer a slightly different point of view? I think the US strategic community always has been obsessed with Pakistan. Should we give any credit to Pakistan for it? Perhaps the outreach of Pakistan and its cultivation of US foreign policy itself has been perhaps of a very high order. And you have found breaks which have happened. Of course, they were part of CETO, CENTO, and all that. After the Cold War, there was a short break, and thereafter, they were, of course, the frontline state in Afghanistan fighting the Russians. Thereafter came a break, and 9/11 came, and thereafter, once again, they became the frontline state. Somehow, their geostrategic location, I'm sure my colleagues would agree on that. Ambassador Kamal Sibal may probably want to comment on that. The geostrategic location of Pakistan is perhaps one of those real estates in the world which any nation would want to have under its control and its influence. You know, the kind of civilizations around it that who border it. So everything goes for anyone who has Pakistan on his side. And that's the perception which is prevailing in the US strategic community. Unfortunately, we have not been able to raise this issue and to reach out to the strategic community in the United States. We need to do perhaps much more. But at the moment, this particular achievement is a very fine achievement, I would say.
Okay. Okay, Ambassador Shibal, the last 30 seconds I have on this part of the show, would you want to weigh in? Has Pakistan been able to exploit its geostrategic location better, or is it a gun for hire, can be used and thrown? Consequences for Pakistan have been bad, but their army doesn't care for their people as long as the army continues to enrich itself.
See, a couple of things. When India and United States had very, very difficult ties, then Pakistan was a very useful tool again to maintain pressure on India. Now that situation no longer exists. We have actually far better relations with the United States than Pakistan has. Number two, the Afghanistan issue is out, and therefore, while the United States is still says it is worried about the activities of the ISI Khorasan or whatever have you, but it's not the same thing as before, where actually they had so many troops for so many years on the ground, and they were suffering casualties and fighting the Taliban. So that angle is out. So far as Iran is concerned, Pakistan and Iran are neighbors. In fact, the United States cannot exploit Pakistan against Iran. Now, when it comes to China, 80% of Pakistan's military equipment comes from China, and they're going to get more. They're getting submarines, and now they would have discovered the gaps in their defenses after Operation Sindoor, and they're going to fill that up. And United States has actually let this happen. They have let the CPEC develop. They have let Gwadar develop. They have not taken any strong action to prevent the possibility of a naval base in Pakistan for the Chinese military navy. Therefore, I don't think that this vision or this hope that some people in the United States have that they can wean away Pakistan from China is not true at all. They will not be able to do so, and China is not going to give up so easily the kind of position that they have now obtained in Pakistan, and it's a very vital element in their overall strategy, not only in South Asia, so-called, but also towards the Gulf.
I will let that be the last word on this part of the show. General Hasnain, Ambassador Sibal, and Professor Latham for joining me here on this India First special broadcast. Many thanks.